Thanks to those of you who spent time watching my 2023 Christmas Eve Texaco Man throwback video. I invite you now to join me for an even farther back throwback, about 1949, when I was a 12-year-old Ballinger, Texas 7th grader. This throwback shifts from my college days working for and against the 1959 world of Texaco gas stations. This time, a nostalgic visit to my small-town baseball experiences. This post is in two parts. Both are about baseball, about me and baseball. First, me as a real baseball player, and second, as an employee of a small-town professional baseball enterprise. My dad, Dixie Hamner, was for several years Ballinger's local manager of the West Texas Utilities Company. Some of you may remember the engaging little ready kilowatt symbol, a splendid bit of marketing and public relations back in the day. And, like today, businesses sometimes sponsored non-professional sports leagues in the spirit of fun. West Texas Utilities sponsored a summer softball team with Dad a player. My hometown of Ballinger at this time also sported a real professional baseball franchise with its state-of-the-art stadium, bleachers, public address system, concession stands, and impressive tall lights just outside the wooden fence encircling the field. Dad, Pop, as he later became in our family, was a lifelong baseball enthusiast and an early infield player. Pictured is his 1927 Coker, Alabama high school baseball team. Next to Pop, Dosser, a fellow WTU employee and baseball team member. A very personal and poignant part of this throwback involves remembering Dangerous Dosser as we knew him. My older brother Howard, our mild-mannered, loving Pop, Dangerous Dosser, and me frequently played hardball catch in our front yard. All four were deep into playing baseball at any possible time. Dosser, if you can imagine, always took a fierce wind-up and threw the ball literally as hard as he could on every throw, despite this just being a game of front yard catch between two grown men and two frightened but determined boys. Certainly Howard and I were way too cool to complain or acknowledge fear. Today's analogy would be bring it on. We simply just had to catch it or be clobbered in our own front yard. My loving and caring mom, Nana, as our family later knew her, took loving and total care of us all. She gave me a quarantine happy hour related joyous life gift, piano lessons. Now for some brief good and bad news. I took lessons before leaving elementary school and continued all through my high school years, ending with a private piano recital during my senior year. Brother Howard and I had a truly blessed raising up experience thanks to Mom and Pop. They had visions for our lives. One evidence of Mom's caring was her patience. She signed me up for piano lessons with teacher Mrs. Cope. I literally forgot to even go to my very first piano lesson, as I was deep into sandlot baseball playing with neighborhood friends. Mom and I undoubtedly had a talk immediately at her learning of my heartless action. I don't remember any detail, but she must have wisely led me into shared music and baseball for my life afterwards. A treasure celebrating Mom's wisdom and guidance for both Howard and me is words from her 1926 high school graduation address. I'm blessed to be reading her words. Ada Bell Springer, Buell High School valedictorian and class president, began her graduation address entitled Our Shadows with these words. From the great morning of the world, shadows have flitted across the fields of nature and portrayed her life in vivid colors. The mountains that rise high into the realms of ether leave on earth their silent shadows. The little sprigs of grass and flowers covered with dew cast their lovely shadows about us. The beautiful song that is poured forth so easily by the lark has its shadows in the echoes that roll from soul to soul. Her address ended with these words: "We have but one life here on earth. We must make that beautiful. Realizing that a beautiful life will leave a beautiful memory, we steadfastly go about our task of fulfilling the hope of the class of 1926, that we as individuals and as a class shall leave behind beautiful shadows in the sunset of our lives." A glimpse into the early life of Ada Springer and Howard Dixie Hamner. In Alabama, Mom grew up in Buell, Pop in Coker, and Howard and my early years in Northport. Buell to Coker was only 5 miles. Coker to Northport was 7 miles. Northport to Tuscaloosa was 1 mile, just across the Big Warrior River. We know Pop made trips from Coker to Buell to watch Mom play basketball at Buell High School. And he apparently was interested in more than just basketball, or who'd be named Buell's valedictorian. Northport soon became home for our family for 4 years before we moved west to Texas. This family memory has only been warm-up words for part 1 of my throwback story, me as a real stuff baseball player. We did go to some Ballinger Cats games, but Pop and I never missed heading to the Big Stuff ballpark for WTU league games when the Cats were playing out of town. I must have been WTU's bat boy or something, always sitting up close and personal with the team. It was, for me, one magical night when everyone in the realized they had an unexpected no-show, and that I was the 9th guy just before game time. When the umpire yelled, "Play ball," I was told to head out to right field. During the game, I chased down some ground balls, throwing them back to guys in the infield without an error. Being in the lineup, I'm sure I had turns at bat, but they aren't memorable. We were being watched by people in the Big Stuff bleachers, and those tall lights were all on. I know I had plenty of time between batters and innings to just marvel at the miracle experience that was happening to me. A remembered thrill was standing alone far out in right field under those amazing lights. A fly ball was hit hard and headed way up into that lighted right field sky. Somehow I got positioned under it and caught it just like a real player in a Big Stuff game. I don't remember who won the game, but I won. This second part of my two-part baseball throwback relives another very interesting night at our Big Stuff ballpark. A junior high buddy and I had been hired for the night's doubleheader games to work for Ballinger's professional team, the Cats, a Cincinnati Reds farm team. The Cats played in Ballinger from 1947 to 1950 and won the Longhorn League Championship in their first year. My buddy and I had earlier been sort of interviewed, ensuring we had sufficient baseball savvy to perform game time duties of managing the ballpark's tall scoreboard behind the left field fence. We were to listen to the public address announce of balls or strikes after each pitch, hang the proper count numbers for balls and strikes happening with the current batter, outs being made, runs being scored by each team during each half inning. Then permanently post innings completed and number of runs scored during the entire 7 innings in both doubleheader games. There would be no break in the action. We did know there were a lot of folks who had bought tickets that would be watching scoreboard results during both games of the doubleheader. The evening was probably a typical West Texas warm and clear sky, with the doubleheader's first game to begin well before sunset. Those amazing field lights were already shining, however, as we made our way around the ballpark fence to the back of the big left field scoreboard. We climbed a ladder to get inside the structure to see what we'd be working with in terms of many large metal placards, each with single numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Each placard had a hole drilled into the top for us to hang it onto the metal hook facing the distant fan sitting in the bleachers. Later, when either team scored, we were to increase that inning's run scored by reaching out to hang a higher number. I do remember our growing excitement seeing cars pull into the parking spots on our walk to the scoreboard. A real crowd compared to my earlier WTU game. Noise was building with expectation for a nearing play ball signal. The announcer's voice came to us loud and clear inside the scoreboard. He was urging fans to hurry to the concession stand before game time. Ballinger's ballpark had 2 concession stands under the bleachers on both sides of the infield. You could either buy first base goodies or third base goodies. Peanuts, popcorn, hamburgers, hot dogs, and even nachos. And we dare not forget one of those memorable all-American soft drinks. The announcer next asked the crowd to stand for an opening prayer, then introduced a local minister who gave the prayer. The loudspeaker next began introductions of the visiting team's players and manager. The crowd noise excitement grew as the Ballinger Cats team players and managers were introduced. The home team was dressed in bright blue and white uniforms with the visitors in gray. There were umpires dressed in black, and one must have yelled, "Play ball," as the first game of the doubleheader began. We worked fast and hard, listening for and guided by the public address announcer's descriptions of each action as it happened. It seemed to me that we'd done okay with what was required of scoreboard operators. We had even interacted with both teams' left fielders. Game 1 ended. I again don't remember who won the game, having placed final score numbers on the final innings hooks. We undoubtedly were now looking forward to our first break in the action, with time between games 1 and 2. We cleared all of Game 1's placards, replacing them with blanks for Game 2. I know in those moments I felt good, like a big stuff scoreboard operator. We climbed down the ladder and began our probably macho walk back around the fence toward a third base concession stand. By then it had become dark and the field's lighting was even more brilliant. I don't remember what we were paid as scoreboard operators, if we were paid at all. Walking back around the fence for our big break between games, I'm certain we were hungry and thirsty, with my early day preferences being an RC Cola and a hamburger. I'll take a moment now to say that my memories for this two-part post have definitely been, so far, poignant and detailed. It all really happened just as the words and the images convey. I did say earlier that we headed back to the grandstand area with a now experienced scoreboard operator macho walk. This is where I should say, I think I remember that. We definitely must have felt relief that we had done well and were now ready for game two. Again, today's language would be another bring it on. I won't comment further as to exactly how we must have actually felt. True, we were undoubtedly in a state of euphoria, and I can't vouch for absolute authenticity of detail arriving back at the grandstand. Therefore, I'll describe and improvise with what I can remember happening at that point in our scoreboard adventure. Beneath the grandstands, it had to have been crowded with long lines for the concession stands. We had to check out both concession stands before buying anything. Being between games, there were many folks moving about, probably discussing game one, encountering friends for discussion, or maybe just out to stretch their legs. It was definitely noisy and lively. I do remember we encountered different groups of school friends, even some of the girls, enticed by the doubleheader game night. This offered us multiple chances to describe the heroics we had just been performing inside the scoreboard structure. And without doubt, I took time to enjoy my RC and burger sometime between impressing kids that we knew. Here's a close-up of that favorite beverage back then, the big RC Cola. And guess who's eating the 1949 hamburger? The public address had again, I imagine, been encouraging folks toward the concession stands as we kept wandering around the area, maybe looking for some others to impress. Everyone seemed happy and having fun. And then it happened.
And cauldron bubble, toe of frog, wing of bat, tongue of dog, double, double toil and trouble.
Suddenly the grandstands above exploded with a roar. Late goody eaters and drinkers probably were scrambling back toward their seats, wondering what they had just missed. Evidently, some fielder had made an unbelievable catch, and so we also ran up some small stairs nearby for a quick look. Over the subsiding roar and applause of the bleachers, we barely heard what the announcer was urgently saying. Scoreboard operators, return to the scoreboard immediately. I repeat, scoreboard operators, return to the scoreboard. Reality swiftly registered with two seventh grade boys, like a screaming inside fastball amid the announcer's pleading commands. We panicked and we began running as fast as we could, out the park gates and onto our earlier heroic post. I'm totally sure we were big time fearful and embarrassed, and not yet thinking what we would say to all of those schoolmates older than us. We sped around the fence to our left field structure with its blank placards on all of Game Two's hooks. We must have just flown up the ladder this time.
And cauldron bubble, toe of frog, wing of bat, tongue of dog, double, double toil and trouble.
I'm sure you may have already guessed some important details regarding our second double-header, toil and trouble challenges. We had leisurely been basking in our glory, stopping to visit with everyone who would listen to us, about us. We were now in a really big hurry, but had unfortunately not stopped to learn what had happened so far in Game 2. We didn't even know what inning it was. In a word, the only thing we really knew is that we had messed up big time. The scoreboard did have openings where we could see the entire field below. I'll never forget the visiting team's left fielder casually walking over to the fence below us and yelling up, "Bottom of the first inning." Equipped with facts that we certainly had to know to move forward, we rapidly hung innings number 1 through 7 on hooks, anticipating a later end of Game 2. Outfielder number 10, along with hundreds of other people, had noticed the pitiful state of our blank scoreboard, an extreme lack of preparedness for Game 2. There was no excuse for our failure. My buddy and I had likely now become the busiest two people at the game. During this extended and unfortunate lapse in time, the distant bleachers must have remained unusually quiet, as fans, probably all of them, watched our recovery. The umpire must have earlier called a timeout at the start of all of these bizarre moments. Dressed in black, he probably had just stood at home plate with his mask off, staring out at the back of our left field friend in conversation with the scoreboard. In this prolonged absence of typical baseball park noise, the announcer probably was once again urging fans toward the concession stands. Two formerly heroic scoreboard operators were now concentrating, positioned, and truthfully eager to please. In conclusion, just to ensure expectations are properly managed, do not expect further baseball scoreboard throwbacks from me. There will be none. So far as memory goes, the WTU team suffered no further no-shows, and I knew that I indeed would be paying for a bleacher seat in any future Cats game. As stated earlier, everything posted and shown in this video you can trust as having been true, or very likely true as best I could remember. Jim Hamner. Supplement. Our friend, the left fielder, remained watchful below us. His gaze probably showed concern. We finished our placard recovery, and he and other players began moving toward infield positions to resume Game 2. As number 10 turned away to leave us on our own, my buddy Ron realized we still weren't ready. He yelled thanks, and then asked number 10 for the score. In exasperation, without even turning around, number 10 yelled back that they were ahead 1-0. Then he kept walking toward his normal left field position. We quickly put a 1 on the visitors' first inning score hook. The umpire then likely again yelled play ball, now for the third time in just 2 doubleheader games. Fans in the bleachers no doubt cheered again with approval as the umpire donned his mask and crouched down behind home plate, awaiting the first pitch for Game 2. The visiting team players, the Carlsbad Rustlers, were now all back into position to resume Game 2. A popular and obviously powerful Cats batter walked to the plate, turning apparently to briefly joke with the ump about the weird interruption of play. The bleachers again grew boisterous with everyone on their feet. If one listened carefully to the yells and excitement, two main themes were unmistakable. First, normal encouragement for the Cats hitter to perform with gusto. However, a second, as more and more fans stood with arms outstretched toward the scoreboard, obviously more than a little unhappy. The Rustlers had not actually scored in their first inning at bat, as the friendly infielder had so kindly shared with us. The actual score was 0-0, a tie game so far. Many impatient folks in the bleachers were so delighted to get back to watching baseball that they paid no attention to the scoreboard. Also, the increasing excitement and noise had most eyes focused on the batter at the plate. The first pitch sped toward the hitter, who responded with a ferocious crack of his bat, sending the ball rapidly toward heaven. And then it happened again.
And cauldron bubble, toe of frog, wing of bat, tongue of dog, double, double toil and trouble.
Then came a second and very much louder crack. Actually, an explosion. All sound across the park immediately evaporated. Instant, complete darkness enveloped the entire ballpark. Tall lights that previously lit up my WTU baseball dream no longer shining. Public address system silent. Cold concession beverages headed toward expected lukewarm. Crowded bleachers a moment earlier, either enthusiastic or angry, became silent as a stone. Everyone stopped breathing. Then a swell of distress sounds. An ominous orange flame shone brightly, billowing smoke trailing from an electrical tower outside the ballpark center field fence. This was the only light. Yes, the tower was one of Pop's West Texas Utilities substations. The power failure blasting and burning more doubleheader, toil and trouble for our now besieged family's small-town reputation. This evil night had earlier offered so much promise. The Cats' hitter's bat had solidly hit the ball in what everyone undoubtedly expected would be a long and lofty launch. The hit's sound, however, was dwarfed by that sudden explosive sound of the transformer failure. Everyone's evening had truly turned dark. And now for the rest of the story, or the rest of my supplement. There were interesting and intense legal proceedings during months after that amazing doubleheader night. Something I forgot to mention. Those two games were actually season-ending contests. No more scheduled games. The Ballinger Cats had easily won Game 1 by a score of 3-1, resulting in both teams now tied for that year's Longhorn League championship. At this moment, the choices, plural, for Game 2's scores, plural, were as follows. As the umpire had not been able to rule on the Cat hitter's home run that was likely in progress, courtesy of the transformer failure and blackout. Choice 1. 1-0, Rustlers leading thanks to our friends' assistance. Choice 2. 0-1, Cats leading, only if the last hit was ruled a home run in absentia by a ruling panel of the Longhorn League officialdom. Choice 3. 1-1 tied game, depending on the outcome of pending legal action. Choice 4. 0-0 tied game, depending on outcome of pending legal action supporting co-champions as a resolution. Regarding these future legal disputes, I knew I would not be personally involved, as my older brother Howard, then in high school, and our Pop had decided just to pick up and move to another state. I changed my name and soon enrolled in a new junior high school. Ridicule and news of my disastrous attempts at professional baseball scoreboarding had quickly and widely spread throughout our small West Texas town like wildfire. Pop, previously a well-known and respected community leader and businessman, had given up his responsibility as president of the Ballinger Rotary Club Service Organization, then had suddenly announced his retirement from WTU. And there certainly was a lot of talk about that WTU transformer. Before my debacle evening, my brother Howard had entered the early high school dating scene. One of his early romances had been with Elizabeth Taylor, later famous worldwide for her beauty and screen stardom. Buford Wilkes, that unfortunate evening's visiting left fielder, no doubt was deeply involved in all ensuing court proceedings, both having played a key scoreboard-related role that evening and having been made his team's manager during the following years. Wilkes later staunchly testified that he had told the scoreboard operators it was bottom of the first inning and the score 0-0. I later read about him in a sports magazine after he had become a newly successful Major League Baseball manager. The magazine had included a biography confirming that the presiding judge had believed Wilkes and dismissed at least some of the case. The final overall ruling of the court specified co-champions for that year's Longhorn League. I realized while writing this throwback that evening I was a real player I totally missed out, or had been cheated out of being announced as right fielder Jim Hamner in the earlier WTU game. There was no public address system in use for that game, a lifelong injury and so difficult to overcome. A few words about my friend and fellow scoreboard operator, Ron Funderburk. At the time of writing this throwback, he and I have been close friends 80 years. Ron, like me, made no further attempts at baseball scoreboards. After his lengthy, action-oriented military service career, we have both suddenly grown really old. After high school, I filled every day as much as possible practicing the arts of baseball. I focused on both fielding and hitting, my hitting earlier not memorable. After some years of hard work and determination, I found myself a popular member of the Ballinger Cats, where I played right field. My first year as a real stuff baseball player, I was named Longhorn League Rookie of the Year and won the year's batting crown, hitting .476 as an average for the year. Before returning to Ballinger, I had changed my name and my hairstyle once again. I had become Henry Hank Dossett, different from Dangerous Dosser. I also had greatly enhanced my strength and physique thanks to a rigorous regimen of exercise leading me into professional baseball. When returning to Ballinger, I felt comfortable that I would not be recognized as part of that not-forgotten scoreboard operator team. Still, however, I was always careful not to appear to recognize close acquaintances and friends, some of them now high school grown-up girls. I had become well known in baseball circles, likely now due mostly to my hitting success. A recent Life magazine had featured my picture on the cover and a lengthy spread on last year's Longhorn League season, titled Hank Dossett Strikes Gold in West Texas. I was popular and often in demand for public appearances at civic events, church groups, and other youth organizations. I always felt a special satisfaction at the start of every game hearing Hank Dossett right field introductions on ballpark speakers, followed by applause if a Ballinger Cats home game. And it felt good even if the game was in Las Cruces, Midland, or Del Rio, even when applause often contained catcalls for "Bring It On" from opposing fans. At one youth church gathering where I was appearing, a beautiful and smiling young woman with gorgeous eyes approached me, asking me to sign her little brother's baseball cap. I smiled back and did so. At her hand offered for thanks, I grabbed it and scribbled my name on her wrist with a ballpoint pen. We married some months later and honeymooned in Dallas. Again, as I've told you earlier, everything I've posted and shown in this video you can trust as true, or very likely true, as best I could remember, except for my supplement. Jim Hamner.